Thank you so much for joining us here on ITV Gold. Attorney General Gurbir Grewal, how are you doing today? How is your office doing today?
You know, that's a really, really tough question to answer in the moment we're living in right now. But under the circumstances, personally, I'm doing fine. I'm healthy. My family's healthy. My kids are healthy. And our employees are doing fine. We have about 7,700 employees in the department. And one of the things that I've done during this pandemic is made a point, even though I can't talk to everybody in person, we've held conference calls with nearly every section and every division in our office, and we're doing virtual meetings and town halls just to stay connected. We've had our share of tragedy, but for the most part, we're doing well under the circumstances, and I hope you are as well.
Yes, trying to do the best we can here, follow the guidelines of social distancing, as you all have been really, pushing for it. Before we go into all of the works you're doing for justice, for, just helping everyone that's in the state of Jersey, I have to ask you, reopening, it's one of the biggest questions everyone has in the state of Jersey and New York. Any comments on that? What can we look forward to?
I think what you could expect is that the governor is going to make the best decision for the residents of this state, keeping the health and safety of all 9 million New Jerseyans top of mind. And as the governor has made clear, his decisions are going to be driven by the data and the best possible science. And we can't forget that New Jersey is just one piece of this puzzle. We have to act in concert with our neighboring states. And so the governor's established a coalition with those governors to work on this regional type of reopening. And so I don't have a timeline. All I can assure you, and you'll be speaking to the governor if you haven't already, that he's going to do the best he can with the data he has and the guidance he has in front of him. And top of mind for him is not politics, it's not polling, it's what's best for public health and public safety right now.
And in terms of the Attorney General's office, what would you say has been the major role and responsibility of your entire office and you during this pandemic?
It's interesting. I don't think most people realize how much we touch the governor's response, the state's response to this pandemic. I'm responsible for 7,700 people in 16 divisions, and nearly every one of our divisions is informing the state's response. For example, I oversee the Division of Law. I have about 500 lawyers there, and they're advising every agency of state on how to move forward with the legal issues that COVID-19's presenting, but more importantly, all of the executive orders that the governor issues are run through our Division of Law. And we make sure that he's finding that balance between protecting public health and public safety on the one hand and protecting individual rights and freedoms on the other. That we're trying to do all of this in a lawful way, understanding that it's a pretty extreme situation in which we find ourselves. So our lawyers are working 24/7 remotely on these executive orders. And then we have all the law enforcement response, our Division of Criminal Justice, the state police, my oversight over the county prosecutors. There we're not just ensuring public safety and public health by enforcing the existing laws on the book, but we're also trying to enforce the governor's executive orders to make sure that people are socially distancing, because that's the only tool that we have to fight this pandemic. And it's working. We're seeing the numbers start to subside.
Just discussing more about what's happening. This time of the pandemic, with what's happening across the nation, the fight for justice has to be the strongest. And, to provide protection for the residents and a safe environment is even more important. What do you have to say in regards to the resources that are available through your office? And what have you seen in terms of crime and activity and its response through the office?
Yeah, so I think one of the things we have seen is that over the last number of weeks, people are abiding by the stay-at-home orders. We had some enforcement early on where we were issuing summonses to individuals who are gathering and still out there in violation of the governor's orders. And we've seen that start to decline. And that's reassuring, because that means people are abiding by these orders, that we're flattening the curve. And our cops, which they have limited resources, protective equipment, they could use that for the most serious offenses. And the other thing that we're seeing across the state, because people are abiding, is that crime generally is going down across New Jersey. So we're not seeing, we have a few pockets here and there of upticks in violent crime in some of our cities, but overall it's trended downward, and that's reassuring. But there's also one issue that's really troubling to me from a public safety perspective. We know from our experience and from research and what we've seen in other parts of the world, really, when people are in close quarters for extended periods of time, you would see incidents of domestic violence increase. You would see incidents of abuse of young people, children, increase, because that same isolation that's helping us with the COVID-19 pandemic is an ideal situation in which an abuser could victimize their victim. And so we're not seeing an increase in reporting as we would expect of domestic violence and child abuse at this time. And I think that's probably because people are isolated and don't know how to reach out or think that we're not there. And I think I want your viewers to know, I want everyone to know that law enforcement is there for them. If they're a victim of domestic violence, our courts are open for them. You can get help. We will help you. And if you're a young person experiencing abuse, we are still here for you, because that's really concerning to see those numbers go down, because I don't want anybody to be victimized in this moment because of the isolation that we're pushing for, which is needed to fight this other pandemic.
Attorney General, what would you say to, these victims that are currently really afraid to seek help? Because you had also advocated for it, that you've recently seen a trend of victims being scared to reach out for help. What could you say to them?
I would say, you could try to find help in a multitude of areas. For example, while we're staying at home, people are still going to the pharmacy. They're still going to the grocery store. So we've worked with our retailers to message out to them how to be there for victims who might reach out. I would tell them to reach out to a friend. I would tell them that they could contact us by text message, and we can get you the resources as to the numbers to contact and things of that nature. But there are a lot of different ways through social media to reach out and to let somebody know that you need help, whether it's law enforcement or a friend. But more importantly than that, all of us as responsible citizens, we should be mindful of what we're seeing going on around us. If we have a friend who we know is in a difficult situation, or we haven't touched base with in a long time, just reach out, see how somebody is doing, just check in on them. And you shouldn't be afraid to speak out on somebody else's behalf if that could save their life.
Definitely. Attorney General, another very important topic that a lot of South Asians want to ask. We are hearing the reports of racism. We're hearing the reports of increase of xenophobia. We're seeing discrimination. I know you have taken a very strong stand against it, but what should the South Asian community know? And should we be afraid of our identity and our culture right now?
Well, listen, I don't think we should ever be afraid of our identity or our culture. I think we should live our identities and our cultures freely, and it's my job to ensure that we're all able to do that, and it's my job to ensure the safety of all 9 million of our residents. And I think as you mentioned, one of my top priorities since I became Attorney General has been fighting back against incidents of bias and hate. So I would encourage folks to report and know that we're there, and know that we have people 24/7 following up on these leads, and we'll hold people accountable if they're engaging in this type of conduct. Listen, I don't think anybody should ever be afraid to live their identity, to be afraid to celebrate their culture, to be who they are, to speak their native tongue, to live their faith freely. And it's something that I fought for since day one as Attorney General. And in this particular moment, we're seeing people who are targeting other people because they might be different, or in the case of the coronavirus, targeting people of Asian descent because they somehow think that Asian Americans or residents of New Jersey are responsible for the situation in which we find ourselves, and using that as a reason to act out on their bias and their hatred. I would let everyone know that we're still here. It might be a pandemic, but cops don't work from home. Cops are still out in the field. Our prosecutors are still going to court holding bad actors accountable. So don't be afraid to report this conduct. I think quite often, the notion of Asians trying to be the model minority, not to stir the pot, we're afraid to let folks know that we're being targeted. Never be afraid to let a law enforcement officer know that you're being mistreated or targeted in any way. We need that information because we can only act on it if you let us know it's happening. And that's the most important thing. I received every bias crime report in the state every day. I get an update on it because it's that personal to me that we want to root this behavior out. And as we see it in this particular pandemic, we are rooting it out where we see it, and we are arresting people who are engaging in criminal conduct like this.
Attorney General, I know we're limited on time, but I have two last questions left for you.
Sure.
Number one would be, for the next 2 to 3 weeks, when we are reconsidering reopening, when we are considering public safety and law, what is your focus? And what are some key topics that have to be looked at, with keen interest through you?
Yeah, I think, my key focus every day is to make sure that I'm doing enough right now to keep the residents of this state safe, to keep law enforcement safe, to keep all the employees that work for the Department of Law and Public Safety safe. So as we look forward to that reopening, I want to make sure we do it in a responsible way. Am I taking enough precautions for law enforcement so they have resources as people begin to interact more socially, as people begin to be out and perhaps engage in more criminal conduct? Do we have enough protective equipment for them? So those are some of the things that I'm focusing on, but I'm also looking ahead. I know from, as I mentioned earlier, when people are in these difficult circumstances, some types of crimes like domestic violence will increase. And when people are having economic crisis, sometimes that also brings about mental health crises. So we're all preparing for those types of eventualities that might happen, and trying to make sure we could do everything we can proactively for that reopening to prevent a spike in crime, a spike in certain types of crime, and ensure the safety of everyone that's coming back to work in all different settings.
My last question to you has to be, healthcare workers are the true heroes and the frontliners for this entire pandemic. There are so many South Asian Americans and other minorities who are also heavily involved in the medical community of New Jersey. This is also Nurses Week. What do you have to say to them? And, how important is it for you to care for these healthcare workers while we get out of this pandemic?
I think they are our true heroes right now, that they are spending time away from family and friends, oftentimes because they don't want to bring it home with them after a shift. They're staying in hotels. We're trying to provide them those types of resources. They are our true heroes, and they are putting in incredible hours and an incredible effort to keep us safe. And I think all of us, I know we feel this pressure to get back out there. When are we going to do it? Let's let them do their jobs and relieve the pressure on our healthcare system by flattening that curve and slowing the spread. So we could relieve the tension on our healthcare system. So when we do open and deal with this virus, because it's not going to go away, that our healthcare system is not overburdened as it is. So I know the South Asian community plays an incredibly special role in our healthcare system. I want to thank everyone, really, all doctors and nurses, in particular, the viewership here to the South Asian community, the doctors in our community. My wife is a physician, and this whole week she's been on call at her hospital, and I see the efforts that they're putting in. They're not going there in their normal clothes as they would to see patients. They're wearing scrubs, and when they come home, they're not hugging their kids as they normally would because they want to take those precautions. So thank you for the incredible sacrifices. Thank you for keeping us safe and healthy, and we're here to support you in whatever way we can.